Hello and welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I have a special guest in store for all of you today, Chef Andrew Sutton. And I was introduced to Andrew by a mutual friend of ours. He is an extraordinary chef at Disney. And when we got to talking, I realized there's so much more to food sourcing, and understanding how to get our food in a better way. So I'm so excited to talk to Andrew with you today. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. And thank you for the invitation. I'm really looking forward.
Awesome. Well, will you share with my audience today what got you into becoming a chef and where you work now and what you do?
Well, becoming a chef, I was a swimmer in college. I actually swam for TCU and came out for a summer job. And somehow it just kind of derailed my whole path. So it was, fell in love with the athleticism of the craft and the artistry of it. And then the whole pieces. And then after that, went to the Culinary Institute of America and started my path. And now I've been cooking for over 35 years and have really done well and kept myself interested.
Nice, very nice. And where do you work now? Where are you head chef?
So currently, I run the signature restaurants for Disneyland, which are Club 33, Napa Rose, Carthay Circle, 21 Royal, and a pastry shop. And so I got a nice team of a couple hundred people that are really enthusiastic about what they do. And it's been really a great ride.
That's amazing. When I think of Disney, I don't think of fine dining. I think of, I've taken my kids to Magic Kingdom and we ate what was there. So you're telling me that there's these delicious fine dining restaurants that are within the hotels of Disney where you can go and experience these curated meals that you're creating?
Absolutely. So I was at the Auberge du Soleil in Napa Valley, Relais and Chateau, and then they came looking for a chef to kind of build something for them. And so I ended up here, and I've maintained the way that I source product, the way that I approach the seasonality of it, the spirit of the food, I guess, and then several different art directions to them, and with the teams we build quite a fine product.
That's amazing. So what is your one of your favorite things about putting together these menus that you put together for the restaurant?
So it's interesting, right? Is a chef, when you're building a menu, it's far different than building dishes. Like when I was young in my career, we would build a dish and you'd go, that's good. And over time, you become really objective about the way you can build them. So it is any number of ways in the inspiration, then just having the knowledge and the background gives you such nimbleness that you can kind of do anything. So if it's a vegetarian meal, you're building your grains and your holy trinities of trying to make sure you got enough nutrient in the background to make it come to work. Or if it's something, for home, I might build my menu where I have an easy course followed by a more complicated course so I can spend time with the guest. But each menu is very specific, and I don't have a favorite dish by any means. They're kind of like children. Each one has a different attribute. But we
Sure.
dabble all over the world, and my team is very diverse in itself. So it's really quite playful.
Very nice. And so do you work on seasonality? Like what are some of your big focuses when you're building these menus?
So biggest driver is seasonality for sure. And to me, this is the fun place that I'd love to share with your listeners because it's so exciting. A good example is like October, November, and December. Each month is very different emotionally than the previous one. October's Halloween and all these things. Thanksgiving's coming, and certainly the holidays of Christmas. And there are different foods that are sort of associated with that. But I worked in Napa Valley, as I said, at Auberge du Soleil, and that's where my commitment to seasonality really began. And doing it right and having the right things and creating vigor is what I call it. And I swear you can taste nutrition. And as a chef, you kind of become a center point for a lot of different things. The best farmer, the best rancher, the way it's raised, where it's raised, the fisherman, how it's caught. I work with Monterey Bay directly, so we're always looking at a good, better, best. But it's this vigor piece that I think is the fun part to share.
Yeah.
It's like springtime. It's chlorophyll. It's relatively quick growing items. You're coming out of this doldrum into summer, which is an abundance of everything, right? But it's different fruits, and you can kind of track it. So, the systemic ability of like trees to pull in the nutrients into a peach is different than a pear or an apple. And so as you kind of rotate through the season, you get everything you need. And the planet's set up for us, right? So in the winter, when it like now, citrus is coming into season with vitamin C, all your leafy greens are coming. Shellfish is abundant and full of, zinc and all these other minerals and that sort of thing. And I think you can really capture everything you need over the course of a year instead of trying to do it every day with like blueberries and salmon because you were told to eat them. You can play a little bit more and have something that adds true life to your life, right? Something enthusiastic, maybe not every day, but at least on one day a weekend where you can share with, friends and family and create all of those pieces to blue zones or any other research that you might have. So it's kind of fun.
I want to unpack that more because it's profound. When you are cooking and you're building these menus and these recipes and these dishes and this experience, you're doing it from such a multifactorial way. You're saying, I want to give them vigor. I think of that as vibrancy. Like, I want to give you the energy and the nutrients you need to be healthy. You pointed out that seasonally, Mother Earth, planet Earth, is already giving us for the next season the nutrients we need if we're paying attention. Zinc, vitamin C from citrus. You mentioned, like, you're right. The seasonal foods are going to give us the nutrients we need for that next season to stay our healthiest. And it almost makes it sound like you're a biologist and a researcher and a nutritionist because you're paying attention to those foods of each season and you're incorporating them in, but you're also sourcing them very deliberately. And that's a piece I want to focus on. When you're sourcing, because it is fine dining and you want it to taste that next level up, what is your philosophy around how you're sourcing, and how can we kind of bring some of that into our lives? Because I don't know about my audience, but I know for myself, well, I can imagine for my audience how it is, but for myself, I'm always every week on Instacart like, okay, these are the foods I get from Costco, these are the foods I get from Sprouts. Only if I go in the store, which I do, can I go pick through, like, oh, we're in the peaches season now, we're in plums, we're in this. I can see the seasonal sections, but so many of us disregard seasons now. And a big piece of Ayurveda is living according to our circadian rhythm and season.
Well, that's a big contribution to it. So for myself, if I travel, I'm in the grocery store almost immediately. Like that's a requirement of wherever I travel. It's good wine shop, a good butcher, and a great grocery store. But for sure, the seasonality is just everything. It comes with it. I mean, where to start? I mean, it brings joy, first of all. And I think that when you're trying to care for somebody, as a chef is, it is hospitality, which is the idea of bringing nourishment to someone. And that comes with a feeling of joy. Now, mine goes into it deeper, like it is making sure it's grown organically. It's seeing how it's known. Is it regenerative? What is the items there? But there are 90-day carrots and there's 180-day carrots. How do you know? You guys will never know. I don't know how you would know, but I can know. And so I'll buy a 180-day carrot. Well, 180-day carrot has more nutrition, right? And if you take that carrot and store it properly in the old ways, like in a root cellar, it can increase by 600 to 700% in its vitamin levels after 90 days. So then you start to look for these things, and all of it leads to taste, which sounds kind of odd that, these are building blocks to get there. And we'll do it with every single ingredient, the heirloom, the varieties. My early career, I used something called slow food movement, which is about not eating fast foods. Yes, you can have pizza. Yes, you can have barbecue. You can have these things, but they're slow in the making. And the fermentation process of doing a dough makes flour more digestible and better for you and brings with it the biomes for your stomach and that sort of thing. And all of that, when you leave, then makes you feel better. The steaks, we play with grass fed versus formula fed versus, different cows and all that. If it's done well, they're generally all great in their flavor profile. Chickens and stuff. I'm going to find the heirloom breed. Thanksgiving, we're coming in. I was searching for something called a bourbon red that dates back to like 1860s. And America and all the world was so great at farming up until about World War II, late World War I, when everything had to become transportable. So you got those nice green tomatoes coming from California, which aren't ripe. They haven't come to full maturity, so you're eating immature. It doesn't have the same level of vigor that you're going to get from something that truly is mature and it's going to bring forth those products. I kind of tapped into there was a rice coming from Tibet, and it's raised at 15,000 feet above sea level, and by the Tibetan monks. And the gentleman who was getting it going, Ken Lee of Lotus Foods, he really believed in creating economies for these people. But then as I delve deeper, they don't eat leftovers, which I can't say I don't. But the idea,
Ayurveda, we recommend no leftovers. I think that's so impractical, but I have a 1 day rule. Like we don't eat food past a day,
that's fair. I
which is
kind of
hard.
like. I kind
Only
of
in
like.
an emergency will I eat second day food, like Monday food cooked on Wednesday. But I try very hard not to because we think that that food is dead and lacking the nutrient density and the vigor and that aliveness of nutrient density that we want.
Oh, exactly. And again, this all comes back to taste. But when you can build this in there, and I think in any profession, if you can keep yourself in study and stimulate the intellectual pieces of it, find those pieces of joy, then you're more active in your career. You're more active in how you live
True.
your life. And I think this can even cross over into exercise and how you live. Like, should we, you're in Florida, right? So slowing down in the winter may not be an option.
Yeah.
But, I remember living in, upstate New York and some of these places where that was the intellectual time where you kind of close up a little bit and you slow things down. And sure, you're out, cross country skiing or doing winter sports, but you have a time to kind of pause. And then
Right.
spring you restart, and maybe by summer you're swimming, in the fall you're cycling or whatever it might be, whatever suits your interest. But you try to create that whole piece of life, because you can't do it all in one day. You can't do it in a week. So if you can kind of make effort to pause, write your poetry, do your deep thinking in the months to come, eat your richer, darker flavors, enjoy and embrace that period of time, your whole life it's just so much more. It's just so much more, and it comes on all different levels.
It's true. It's richer, it's deeper. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I'm from Texas and I live in Florida. And I did study in Boston, and that short blip decided for me that I will never live in the Northeast in this lifetime ever. I wasn't built for that. But you're right, because we don't have that season here, in the winter, we actually want to ramp up because the weather's nicer. So every weekend, we're like, we should go do X, Y, Z. Like, finally, our weather's beautiful. And it's the opposite in other states, of course, in the north, because it's colder. But we are meant to seasonally take that time to become more cave like, to really hibernate, to really tune in, and like you said, withdraw. And it calls for a completely different diet. And so when it comes to foods, and as you're talking about these menus and these ideas, will you kind of go over that idea of nutrient density from the soil that you mentioned? Because people might not realize, like, you buy food, that doesn't mean it has vitamins or minerals in it. Mass produced farmed foods in America oftentimes have been stripped because of the soil. And so I do see this regenerative soil movement, but will you kind of explain why you use it and how you're supporting it growing by what you're doing?
So this is all in my own personal opinion on how I approach life. So I'm also a gardener. Wanted my kids to know I have two daughters, and wanted them to know where food came from. My wife is also a chef, right? So it's easy for us. But knowing that density and plants, the way they grow, when they're in the right soil, there's a whole biome that goes on with bacteria and stuff that's digesting items so that the plant can get more healthy, and it all works together. Again, that's, bringing that vegetable to its highest level of vigor. So trying to seek those out is hard, but it can be done. You just have to find the people who care. The whole farming aspects of working with the planet, in the bio, what am I looking for? What's the word? The bio,
Like the biome ecosystem of our
yeah,
land.
biodynamic farming. So
Yes.
when it brings, they move through their farm slower. They pay attention. They're if a plant is healthy, it doesn't get attacked by bugs. So you don't need sides, and pesticide, homicide, suicide. They're all dead, right? It's not good for you. You don't want them. Potatoes are often sprayed with a side that'll kill the spuds from developing. Well, you don't want that. So I actually spend a great deal of the time of trying to find those products that are really clean.
Mm.
Even if they're manufactured, I look for the cleanest possible product, and in that it expresses its flavors better and more true. And then you build these, to your point, these really dense and rich foods. And quite frankly, you don't need as much, right? So if you eat this way and you have a good balance of what's going through, you feel satiated. If you eat a bag of Doritos, you're not so satiated. You're hungry again, or you don't feel good, or I get headaches, which is, just being an athlete and paying attention to your body. When it doesn't make you feel good, you stop. You go to a different way. And then
True.
we are funny creatures, though. You have to program yourself. You can learn to like anything, which is so sad, but you have to
True.
make the effort and experiment, and try that thing that you think you don't like. And hopefully, if it's something you're not sure about, go to some place really good and try it there and see if you like it. And then if you don't like it there, maybe you don't like it from a taste point of view. But for us, we don't even think about taste. We think about how it's structured and built and cooked. Is it roasted properly? Is it prepared properly? Is it, what is it about that item? I was not a big fan of Brussels sprouts, right? And, but I can cook them beautifully and roast them in a wood burning oven, and people go, oh, well, that's actually pretty good,
Wow.
versus something else. So it just gives you more and more options.
It's true. And you mentioned biodynamic farming. I think you do have to work at it to source your food well. And this year I turned 44. Either I've turned it or I'm about to turn it. I think I'm turning 45 this year. I don't keep track properly
Uh-oh.
anymore. But as
Uh-oh.
I've hit my mid 40s, I have realized more so than ever that my health is not a given and I have to work for it. And usually I'm so disciplined, I can put a plan in place and I just execute. And I'm so obsessed with health, it's not hard because my commitment and discipline to health is like my number one value. But this year, all of a sudden, it's required all new equations, all new inputs, all new efforts. And so I'm very much paying attention to food quality because if I eat dinner and I'm not satisfied, I'm going to go munching. I'm going to go look for my favorite treat, which is these dark chocolate almonds clusters from Sprouts. They're one of my favorite like treats just to finish the meal. Or I'll look for chips because I'm a salty, crunchy type. And I'll always think to myself, what did you do wrong? Like usually you have decided what you're eating. It's three boiled eggs. It's this is your grain. It's going to be gluten free. Like I've usually built the meal to be exactly what I believe is good for me. And what I've realized is if I don't eat a salad before every meal, I'm not satiated. It's just the new thing I've realized that I need some raw, I need some fresh, I need that nutrient density, I need that crunch, I need that flavor profile. I need something to make me happy before I eat that ultra healthy meal that I didn't make as satiating. And so, can you just speak into that a little further? Because I think people forget in this age of very specific diets that if we lack nutrient density, we're going to lack satiation. And then that's why we're going to have such a crazy obesity, metabolic pandemic that we're struggling with, epidemic, and we could have beat that at the beginning, like at the beginning, by changing our diet itself, by
Sure.
seeking that nutrient density.
So I have friends that hate salads. I happen to love them. Now there are some really cool things, and my mind's kind of shooting in 100 different directions. One, if you can buy adult plants, right? So there's a lettuce called Little Jim, right, that is fully grown, but it's small. And if you can get fully grown, again, you have the opportunity to have more nutrient in there. But then again, if you go into the seasonality piece, we harvest plants at 9 different stages, right? From blossom to sprout to mature to all these other things. And it does give you texture and other things that you can look at. Because part of that satiation is you have to have some feeling of joy and a crunch. And I find with salads, like I need the moisture. I want that whole piece going in. It does make me feel real clean as I'm in my tummy, right? When I'm sitting there and enjoying it. And then when I'm eating my balanced, nutrients that are coming in and adding weight to my diet. So it's almost like a balance of weight and lightness that you're putting in. And it should be quite measured. And I think that really has some value. And then we play in our basic of just building a flavor, right? We call it woofers, tweeters, and mid range. So a little brightness from some acid like lemon juice or a vinegar that might have some great, items, for the belly. If you go into the mid range, that's your substance. That's your main piece of flavor, whether it be a roasted chicken or a chicken broth, that might be the aroma that you're needing. But if you can do that well, and get high quality, you use less salt to make it taste great. Or if you're building a soup, that mid-range piece of it, whether it's a curry, that whole piece will hold together. And then you want to add weight to it. So maybe a dark flavor of beans or something of that nature. And they typically are, as referred to, a little light, a little dark, and making that kind of finish. So I
You
don't know if
just,
that helps.
you blew my mind. Wait, I never thought about that as an aspect of food, but it makes so much sense. So it's probably one of the issues I'm struggling with food is when I build a meal, I'm very compartmentalized, which I find irritating because I want meals to be cohesive. But in my health model currently of high protein, I'm like, okay, you got your Greek yogurt, 20 grams, done. Okay, good job. Okay, now you ate your salad, but it could have been a light salad. Good job. Okay, you could still get some carbs, so lentils and rice. But if the lentil was small, then everything actually was kind of light in the meal. No wonder at the end your stomach's like, hey, you didn't give me the solid thing I was looking for.
And you can still eat at 80, 90% full or whatever you want, 70% full, but you're absolutely right. So if I'm building you a tasting menu, right, we're going to do, 5, 6 courses. I'm going to start you off, you've probably come in hungry, and I'm going to hit you a little amuse, and maybe it's a ginger carrot broth and nice, but it's going to give you something to get you going, right? Then we're going to take you around to the lightness, but we're going to finish for sure with that rice and lentils to give you some base. You're going to get the combination of all your aminos, coming in. You're going to feel pretty good about that. But, maybe you needed something like a tomato in there somewhere too. Or maybe there's, this time of year, I'm probably giving you braised greens if you're wanting to stay in the vegetarian realm. I might be adding your yogurt to it. Maybe there's a crepe on the outside, so it's packaged, and then it's got this more than just eating a bowl of what I need to be healthy, which just is, it's wonderful and you feel good. But it's not the kind of thing that makes you have joy in your life either. Where when you have a conversation, you take your time, you spend your visiting with your family and friends, or somebody who's just, if you have a good table mate, your dinner experience is so much better. So
True,
you gotta
true.
you gotta have somebody there.
And in this day and age, we've changed food and how we look at food so much. A lot of us in the health and wellness world look at food as fuel and stop being so attached to what you're eating. That's weakness. You should just eat what you're supposed to eat. You're fueling a vehicle. And I find that you can do that. I can do that for a couple weeks. I can put myself on any horrible plan I can come up with. No sugar, no gluten, no all these things. Eat seasonal. I can do a lot of things, but when we take out the joy, eventually the body's going to seek that joy somewhere. And so either it's Friday night and my body will say, I need a glass of wine. I deserve a glass of wine. It's Friday night. It's been a long, stressful week. Finally, my job is done with the kids. I can just relax. And that craving for like dropping it down a couple notches can be so strong. And so now talking to you, I'm just thinking, if we source the ingredients differently all week, if we brought in even the depth and the beautiful thing you said around enzymes and amino acids, like when you said start with lemon, you're activating that digestive fire to be ready for that meal. And you're paying attention to the weight of the food to ensure satiation. Imagine what a different experience we would have.
Oh, absolutely. You know, because it's not, you are fueling yourself, but you have to. So what is a vitamin? So for me, like, you need beauty in your life. If you don't have it, you start to crave things, right? And it's kind of weird. You don't feel as upbeat. You can get depressed, right? If you don't have those pieces of joy where you look forward to that weekend, and if it's a meal that starts to reflect the emotion of like the populace that's around you, then it starts to get sort of exciting, right? And you're like, oh wow, hey, we're going to go do this, or we're going to do that, or we're going to a friend's house and they're going to do this, you know. And then you start to build all of that, the mental, the emotional, the nutrient, the nourishment, all of that starts to fall in line. And I think it just makes for a better life. So I'm old, I'm 62, and you know, still having a great time and running around, and hopefully it keeps going for a long time. Or if it doesn't, hopefully it ends quickly. I can just move on.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it won't, based on how you're sourcing your food and the
I'm very
way,
careful.
yeah, and the consciousness around it. I was just thinking that in the pandemic, I paused and I thought, if we're gonna die, at least we got to enjoy the food. Because I am very much about food. I choose not to be because I'm so obsessed with health, but I am totally obsessed with food. You can tell if you're anywhere around me. I'm trying to feed everyone all the time and make sure everyone's eating.
Sure.
Um, but when it comes to food, I finally took the time. I like downloaded New York Times, found all these recipes. I found this amazing farmers market an hour away called Swank Specialty Produce. And then I'd source the best mozzarella with the best heirloom tomatoes and this fresh basil. And I would just create these epic, delicious meals. And it felt so good. But that's not something I would make the time for in my daily life now. My daily life schedule's pretty intense.
Mhm.
A lot of days we're eating out because it's like school activity finishes, you've got 1 hour to eat, you've got the next school activity. So I'd say twice a week, even in the 5 days of the week, we're eating out. It's either Chipotle or Thai food with my kids and I. So that's 3 weekdays and then the weekend. But I think if we can bring in trying these recipes and bringing this consciousness and joy back into food, at least on the weekend, like you said, then some of that can translate into the week as well. So how would you guide people to do that?
Well, it takes time, right? You know, so first of all, like to your point, like you got to strip away the fact that food's bad for you. There's a lot of negative press on everything is going to kill you. But
It's
once
true.
you have some good understanding, and I would assume your listeners actually are pretty solid on their understanding of health and where they want to take their mind and body and soul. But it's really getting you know, Instagram and all these tools will get you to a place. I still like old magazines, like I like flipping through them because it takes me to an article or a flavor that I may not, you know, consider, and all of a sudden you go, oh, that sounds pretty good. And it opens you up a little bit. But I would shop in my mind for what I want to eat this weekend for next weekend.
Okay.
And then you want to bring that food in like on Thursday so you can have it around and maybe dapple with it a little bit on Friday and then serve it on Saturday. So you can spread it out. I would recommend setting a table, you know,
Mm.
and eating at a table, and not just in front of the television set, put away the phones, all that jazz, all the distractions. But there's so many sources for great stuff, clean foods that are out there. There's some great authors that are just, really fun to watch. Look at the seasonality and then apply the skills that If you want vegan yogurt, that sounds great. Just be careful with those manufactured products because they can be, a bean, a single element of a bean that's got oil spun in it. Like, is it really something that's real foods?
Sure.
Ayurvedic is curries, it's greens, it's vegetables, it's real foods that are going to bring you this satiation. You just have to be a little bit careful to kind of navigate them. And then try to make it more than one thing. You can do the one pot cooking, which I love at home for my friends and family, super great. But if you add that course, like your salad course, then you have your main item, kind of spread it out a little bit. It can be fun, or serve it family style so everybody can kind of pick what they want when they want. Is
True.
no two people really are the same, right? So it kind of gives you a bit more. Recipe wise, I love Mediterranean diet, but it can be any cuisine. So I love it. I have, a Korean chef and I'm a Hispanic chef, and I'll give them the same ingredients and they apply it so differently. So the ability to do lateral thinking is something that I just love and thrive on. And it's a big part of the way I compose. But it's all based on, again, that clean approach to the food. And obviously, we all know that the Mediterranean diet works really well.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
some other people break it into zone and some other pieces, right? But it all kind of comes back to this nice balance, which is almost grandparent like. And if they did a pretty good job and lived pretty long, it might be something you want to try. If they didn't, then I'd probably avoid it. So you can
True.
go with your own history.
True. And when it comes to how you source, just going back to that, because I find it fascinating. Um, when you source foods, how are you finding artists and someone in Tibet these ingredients, and how are you what's your philosophy around it? Is it sustainability? Is it flavor first? Is it nutrient density first? Sustainably third? Like, what is your kind of philosophy around how you're sourcing, and what are some examples of some fun ones you've sourced where you're like, I'm really grateful I found this one vendor for mushrooms or truffles or whatever it may be?
So I built the community that we have now. So it took a long, long time, and it was through just pure demand for good, better, best, right? And seeking through flavor and trying to find it. So, finding a forager that can get you the mushrooms, and mushrooms is like a whole world. And the ones that do it great, are just incredible. I have a woman who shops the local farmers market, and her knowledge base is great. And then, I said, hey, I need this seed and I want you to grow this thing for me. It was called Castle Franco. It's a white radicchio. It's a little unique. Presentation was kind of part of the drive. And the farmer's like, I'm not growing that. It's an expensive seed. And I said, look, I'm going to use X amount a week for this many weeks. He goes, oh, you're going to change your mind? I go, I will, but it won't affect us. So just let me know when it starts to run out of season. And then we'll just pull it off the menu and we can change very, very quickly. Again, that kind of base. But it really goes back to flavor first for sure. And then I found that when it tastes great, it probably is raised well. But then I delve in and I go in, how was it raised? Where was it caught? How was it, manufactured? Where was it built? And it's hard for me to be concise in this because there's so much. Like immediately I was on a board and we were doing global seafood, right? And
Okay.
there were people from all over the place, and we had this neat little lexicon of beautiful minds, and it was from the policy writers to the chefs to the people who harvested and all these things. And I was like, I really want more vigor in my salmon.
Sure.
And so we'll do a cutting and we'll bring in probably 10 different types of salmon, and then we'll cut them and see how they perform.
Wow.
With 35 years of experience, having the understanding of the anatomy and how it works, I can feel that the bone density might be softer. I can tell that the muscle structure is not the same. I can see that the level of fat is not the same, right? And so you get these telltale signs that lead you to a path, and you start to go, that's not that great. And then we'll go ahead and taste, and we'll cook them and let that item sit and see if there's any weep, because there's a lot of ways to, unfortunately, food is manufactured, right? So there's ways to elevate the omega-3s in salmon. Well, did they stay in the salmon? Is it really part of the muscle, or is it more like kind of falsified and it's not really part of that muscle? And so when you eat it, is it really going to stay within you? Or is it something like an omega-3 that's built from some sugarcane plant down in Brazil and then it's been floated into the feed and they're hoping you're going to get the right thing?
Right.
So, it's a lot of research, is what I'm saying. And then once we've got that, then we choose that product. So there's no real straight way to get there.
Sure.
Growing your own, I think, is super helpful. And if you can do some gardening when you taste that, really fresh tomato of a heirloom variety that works in your part of the world, it is pretty amazing. And then you start to understand, well, gosh, if I could have that, what else could I have? And then when you go to the market, you go, okay, this is what I need because I know what it's like. And you start building knowledge base, I guess, is the best answer to that.
It's so true. There's so much frankenfood and there's so much manipulation of food now that's, I think, so dangerous for us. And we have to pay attention to it. And so you've brought up so many powerful points today. Like, if the food profile is incredible, that's an indication of how it was grown, which thus indicates its nutrient density and how good it is for you, what it's going to do for you, how much vigor and energy and benefit it's going to give you. And then in addition, how you source and really pay attention to your ingredients can really matter. Because a lot of times for the common person who's just going to buy food at the store, my choices are just what's on that wall. I don't go much deeper than what's right there. But it's funny, when I go to India, this year I went to India and I had a few days before my family arrived because I had a photo shoot, I had some supplier meetings to do. And my husband's like, please just go early. Because I know once you get your work done, you'll take care of everybody. But if your work's not done, you're going to be frustrated trying to get your stuff done while we're all in your way. So
Sure.
I left early and I stopped at the vegetable and fruit markets and I sent all these pictures to my aunt and she laughed and she goes, you're just like your mother. You show up in India and instead of shopping for the fancy clothes and shoes, you're off buying fruit and vegetables. And I said, do you understand we can taste food in India that we cannot taste in America? Like, carrots don't taste like that here. So the only time I get to experience a carrot is every other year in India. And she laughed at me. She's like, I can't believe you're a copy of your mother in this way. But it's so interesting when we explore other cultures. If they haven't done what we've done to our food, you can actually taste the vegetable. Because in my house, when I'm cooking Indian food, I have to put so much spices and salt and everything to make the dish taste good, versus if the carrots and everything are sourced in the way you're talking about, not much is needed.
No, for sure. Yeah, that's that mid range. You don't have to season hardly at all.
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you get that great product, and you kind of touched on something, about like, uh, I would also say to your people, delve in all the world of like food. You can travel through a meal, so it can keep you fun. If it's Italian or Portuguese or Spanish or Asian, Korean, whatever, it gives you a chance to kind of have, and they bring different pieces with them. But
Right.
it really, you're voting with your dollars, right? So if you really like these things and you want something, you do have to know some behind it. You do have to do the research, know a little bit about the farm. If you can meet them, which is sort of what I do, right? I literally go to them to see what they're up to. And these people can be just great and fascinating. And then there are some really, great farms all over America that are just doing fantastic job. There's one, it's what's called White Oak Pastures, which is it's out of Georgia. I mean, it's relatively close to you, is why I bring it up. But
Nice.
they do the regenerative farming, right? So they have, all this stuff that's working well with the planet. Again, they're paying attention to what the product is, Cleveland's got some great farmers up there. Farmer Lee Jones is really knowledgeable about what he does. If you can find somebody who's biodynamic, for sure, I mean, you can look into it. But they're kind of specialized, and then if you can grow your own, you're going to have a great meal.
True. Very true. And when it comes to some of your favorite chefs who you follow, before we wrap up for today, what are some of your favorite chefs or authors around food that you love who've impacted you that we can share with our audience today?
Well, I came out of Texas as well, right? So, Dean Faring was really fun because he did American regional cuisine. I think it does a great job. I mean, they're pretty much the top 50 chefs, of America. You can kind of look at Daniel Boulou is fantastic. I love Le Bernardin in New York City. I think the flavors are great. John George. I mean, these are really tremendous people. I had an incredible meal in Spain at a place called Extaberry,
Hmm.
which is one of the top 50 restaurants. But he cooks everything on over wood, which the solid fuels are kind of fun, but it's not smoky. And he
Okay.
just does a fantastic job. Golly, there's so many. It's funny as a chef, where you must be so critical, and it's kind of quite the opposite. We love restaurants. That's
Yeah.
why we're in the restaurant business, right? So now when the price goes up, you start to become more discerning to really kind of evaluate what it is. We just did a food and wine festival out in Hawaii with Roy Yamaguchi and Alan Wong and a whole bunch of other chefs, and they're really pretty well grounded in their craft and their knowledge.
Nice.
The fun ones are hard to find. The really molecular chefs, I don't gravitate towards. I think they're interesting, but it's kind of a micro trend. It's
Right.
hard to find the chef that knows the old skills of like Ballantines and Galantines, and really sharing those deep rooted skills of preservation, and understanding that. And to preserve has really got a whole nother realm. And it's probably my next area of really solid investigation,
Okay.
working with the Jongs and that sort of thing. But there's a lot out there. So to find your good restaurant when you travel, we find we go back to the one that's just extraordinary
Of
because
course.
I don't want to have a bad experience. So.
For sure. Of course. Well, I can't wait to come out to LA one day to Disneyland and come visit one of your restaurants, experience your incredible food and experience the healing aspect of what you're talking about because I know you put so much love into your food, so much intention, and just meeting you has really opened my eyes back up to the potentiality of sourcing our food in this conscious way with more intention around supporting local farms, voting with our dollar, but also getting creative and really finding those foreign might not be the right word, but far away ingredients that are really specialty, but would be really fun to play with. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming onto my podcast and sharing your insights. Do you have any final last words for our audience today? And then will you share the name of your restaurants again so they can come find you?
Oh, absolutely. So, it's just in closing, try to learn how to cook for 12 people. My daughters are not chefs, but they can cook for 12 people, and it brings a really wonderful piece to their life and being able to share. If nobody does dishes, then don't do dishes into the morning. But if everybody does dishes, take advantage of that great conversation over by the sink. If they don't do dishes, don't invite them back. They're no good. You need better friends. Uh, as far as the restaurants, Napa Rose, Carthay Circle, Club 33, 21 Royal, and then, of course, the Grand California Bake Shop. But, come see me. I'd love to see you at Napa Rose. That's the easiest one to get into. And we'd love to take care of you. It's part of the joy. And put joy in your life. Don't be afraid of food. Just be moderate.
I love that. Thank you for that reminder today. Thank you, Chef Andrew. It has been so wonderful to get to know you, and I can't wait to meet you in person. And thank you, everyone, today for listening to the Fusionary Health Podcast, where we dive into all the topics around food and health and well being, and all the ways that you can build a life of joy and vibrancy for yourself. So if you love this episode, please share it with your loved ones. If you know someone out in LA who can benefit from Dear Chef Andrew, please do that and share this. And I can't wait to see you next week on the podcast. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.